Okay, so today I'm going to go ahead and show y'all how to flash an H710P mini RAID controller to IT mode based firmware. Now there's going to be a lot of reasons y'all are going to want to do this. In fact, I probably don't even need to list them because that's probably why you stumbled upon this video searching keywords or trying to figure out how to do this yourself. And you stumbled upon the fact that the flash procedure is a little bit different when it comes to doing in these proprietary RAID controllers for the PowerEdge servers. Well, let's get into it. One of the benefits of doing the IT mode based firmware is that you're essentially just bypassing all the software that's on the RAID controller. So it's just directing the drives directly to your OS and the resources on your server. No more cache, no more battery, no more software, and the RAID controller won't be causing you issues because it won't be writing that RAID controller information to those few sectors on the drive, which can cause problems with BTRFS or ZFS. Also, you get a really nice performance gain when it comes to IOP performance when you do this. So, first things first, we need to remove the battery. The battery can cause us issues during the flash procedure as it can keep data retained in the RAID controller while you're doing the flash procedure. So, right here, as you can see, I already took the battery off of mine. You're going to want to make sure the battery's off of yours too. Here's the battery. I should have probably kept it in there for the video, but I didn't. Little battery right here. It's not going to be used anymore. Probably the best place for this bugger right now is so now that you confirm the battery is off of the RAID controller, you just slap your server back together, whichever server you're doing it on. This procedure is pretty much the same for like the H310, the H710, H710P, etc., etc. It's pretty much all the same. So, and it's really easy to do. There's not many commands to type at all. That was rude. Okay, you're back on. So when you get to this introduction page, after you pull up the link that's on the bottom of my banner, you're going to go ahead and get to this page. Now this guy right here, which I do not know how to pronounce his name, so his name is just going to be this guy. I can try to pronounce it. I think it's Fodesha. Maybe one of y'all can tell me how to pronounce this because I don't know how to pronounce this. Anyway, he did a really good job on this. So I just don't know how to say his name, so I'm just going to call him this guy. So this guy made this beautiful, mostly automated flash-based script for these cards right here. So anyway, you're going to want to be on the introduction page when you get here, and you're going to want to go down to Dell Perk Flashing Zip. And you want to go ahead and download this. After you download it, which I already have, so I'm just going to go over here to all my random stuff I have. Now, when you do this, you can either throw this on a PXE server, put it to a USB flash drive, which is the easiest. You're going to be making 2 USB flash drives because part of the process is going off of a Linux-based flash drive, and the other part of the process is going off of a DOS-based flash drive. So here's your 2 files here. So I'm going to go ahead and use Rufus. Go ahead and open her up right here. Go ahead and select this. Go over to firmware. Per crossflash. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to go ahead and do the FreeDOS one first. So let's go ahead and get this one prepared. Okay, so now it's making a USB out of that ISO, so it's bootable. Got that one finished. Okay, so we have the FreeDOS USB finished. Now we're going to go ahead and do the Linux one. And while that's gone, we're going to go ahead and go to my card, which would be an H710P D1 Mini, which I've worked on a lot of these servers, and usually it is the D1 series for these H710Ps. And I've only seen like one different out of like 10 H710P cards I've flashed before, so. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put that DOS USB in the server right now and boot to it. So put you in right here. Make sure power cord's in there. And I'm going to post it. Now while that's posting, I'm going to go ahead and go back to my Windows machine here. And we're just going to scroll through the drive real quick. So I'm going to be booting to the FreeDOS version. So I'm going to be booting to the DOS USB I just made. And I'm going to be executing a command called info. Now the primary reason we're executing this command right here is because we're going to want to get the SAS address of the card. Okay, let's go ahead and boot to that USB. When you're doing this too, I'd recommend always choosing UEFI. Also, whenever you get to this step, well, the first thing you're going to do when you get to this step, before you even get here, you want to make sure your BIOS is factory resetted. There is like 2 settings that will affect this procedure. I think SRIOV Global is one of them, or maybe like a watchdog setting. But I've had an experience with that causing a problem, so you're going to make sure your server is factory resetted and do a complete power cycle, pull the plug and everything before you turn it back on, and you go ahead and proceed with this procedure. I'm going to go ahead and boot to that USB I made. So when you get here, you should come up with the phrase, "Y'all finna get flashed," because that's exactly what's going to happen. Y'all finna get flashed. Something like that. Alright, so what you want to do here on the screen, on my screen that looks like, what does this screen look like? Looks like one of those squares attempting to go on a diet but didn't work out too well. That's what the screen looks like. Now the reason it looks like this is because I'm using a KVM and I'm in i3 window manager right now. So if I want to fix this, I have to go to view and full screen. And there we go. Now it looks a lot prettier. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and type info. Okay, so as you can see, here's my SAS address. This is pretty much the only reason we need to run this command. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my phone, or you can use screen capture software or whatever I want to do. And I'm just going to go ahead and take a picture of that SAS address right there. That SAS address is important. If you don't use the same SAS address, it can possibly give you issues booting to drives because the motherboard might not exactly know how to point directly to that SAS controller. I've also seen sometimes where it actually doesn't matter. I've cleared mine out with a 000 before because on one of the cards I flashed I forgot to do this procedure, and it was on a T7610, and I was still surprisingly able to boot to the OS. But I believe it also made it so in the BIOS I couldn't find that SAS RAID controller anymore, but I was still able to boot. That's a long story. Anyway, moral of the story is you need that SAS address. Don't lose it. Take a picture of it. I also believe that part of it might be associated with the serial number of the card. So if you do happen to, let's go ahead and, yeah, the primary reason you run that command is you want that SAS address. So go ahead and take a picture of it or whatever. Get that SAS address. Okay, while still in FreeDOS, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and clean the card. When we type this command, we're pretty much nuking the card. So I'm going to type in PD1 cross. Now, if you're doing this on the H310 or a different RAID controller for these generations of servers, which essentially this guide I'm showing here is for, well, the command is going to be different. So I'm going to go ahead and run PD1 cross. It's saying you're sure this is the card? And so I'm sure it's the card. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And then push any key. And what it's going to go ahead and do is it's going to go ahead and clean the card. It's getting nuked. So we're nuking the card. Let's go back to my Windows machine here. So let me show y'all where we're at. We ran the info command, and now we're cleaning the card. And then after we clean the card, we're going to go ahead and do a reboot. And this time we're going to be booting into the Linux USB that we created. As you can see, this does take a little time. And I have substituted my face for a nice, pretty steel box on the lower right-hand corner. I hope you all find that entertaining. It doesn't do much, it kind of just sits there. Although I wonder the stories it would have to tell. Okay, press any key to write IT mode SBR. So we're going to press any key. I'll be making another tutorial on how to do this with MegaRec and the SAS to Flash command line too. So, if there are no errors above, you may press any key to reboot. This is where I would personally say we're not gonna just reboot. We're gonna do just a hard power off now. So, without even pushing the power button or anything, I'm just killing her. Now the reason for that is, we're doing a hard power off right now, and then after you pull the power cord, go ahead and hit that power button a few times and make sure everything's drained. While you got the cord out, go ahead and grab your Linux USB. Pop it in the back. Put your cable back in and power it on. So the reason we did that is to ensure that none of the components in the server are holding any information. That was specifically one of the issues with having the battery in, is sometimes you'd have to reboot twice, or you could just do this to avoid that problem altogether. Just pull the power cord and just skip the reboot process altogether and just do a hard power off, make sure the power is drained, and then there's no battery in the Ray controller. That way this will prevent you from having any other issues that you might stumble across and you're like, hey, why when I reboot it's not working this well. That's the reason. I've ran into it a few times myself. I've flashed around 10 plus cards of these so far, so I don't know about y'all, but power characterization and that life cycle controller can be a real pain when it comes to boot time. So I usually just go about disabling them. But you need the life cycle controller for some of the firmware flashing. Not this one though. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit F11 to go ahead and get back into my boot menu here. Also, when you're doing this, you're gonna make sure that you're booting UEFI. I think I've came across a problem or two when I've noticed that when it was in DOS mode, it on one of the cards I was doing, it had some problem identifying it. And I believe it was because I wasn't booting UEFI. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit enter here for booting into that Linux USB bootable we made. If you see any messages like this, just ignore them. Some of them are completely normal. Okay. Well, if you see any errors, I shouldn't say they're just completely normal. But they're not going to pertain to us in this situation. Okay. Now next, according to the guide, we're going to go ahead and we're not going to do the IP info. There's really no point in that. We don't need a SSH, just running like a few more commands. So we're going to go ahead and do the sudo su dash. So and then we're going to go ahead and do the D1-H710. And that will actually run the flash script. D1-H710, now we're going to hit enter, and the flash procedure shall commence. So we've already cleaned the Ray controller, now we're just actually flashing it. Okay, now going back over here. After the flash process finishes, we're going to do another complete power off, not just reboot. And then we're going to turn it back on, boot back into the Linux USB, issue the sudo su command, and then we're going to program that SAS address back that we took a picture of. So as you can see here, the flash process has successfully completed. So now, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. Instead of rebooting like the guide says, we're doing a hard power off by just pulling the plug. And we're going to go ahead and hit that power button a few times in the front just to make sure the capacitors and everything are drained. Now we're going to power back up and boot to that Linux USB again. Okay, so we're finally here. Now I'm just gonna push enter. And whenever she finishes booting back into that Linux-based USB, we're just gonna do the sudo su and we're gonna set the SAS back. And we're gonna be putting that SAS address that we took a picture of before. So sudo su, enter, set SAS. Okay, I got the picture on my phone now. And I'm just going to type in that SAS address. Okay, that said I program the SAS address back successfully. So now the card has finished being flashed with the IT mode based firmware, and we have set the SAS address back. So now the card is in fully functional condition, which means that if you're in OS, you'll be able to see the drives, you'll be able to work with the drives, but, and there's a big but, we have to flash the boot images if we want to actually be able to boot with that RAID controller. So let me go back to my Windows machine here. So if you look here, it says optional boot images. Now one of these is for UEFI and the other is for BIOS, so we're going to want to do both of them. That way when we're doing a BIOS or UEFI based boot, we can actually boot into the operating system. There's two areas you have to set boot. So yeah, you're going to be pushing like Control-C when the server is starting, and you'll be able to choose one of those 12 drives if you have them fully populated in your R720XD. Be able to choose what drive you want to boot from. Then in your BIOS, you're going to have to actually set the RAID controller as the card you want to boot to. That way your BIOS knows that, hey, whenever it's booting, I'm going to go ahead and choose the RAID controller as the primary boot device. Then when you do the Control-C on the RAID controller is going to be like, hey, we're going to use this drive to boot to. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that process here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is, because we want to flash those optional boot images onto the RAID controller, we're going to go ahead and type in flash boot, and then root, bootloaders, tab it out, mpt, SAS, enter, and then the same thing, flash boot, root, bootloaders, tab it out, x64, SAS2.rom, enter. Okay, that's it. Now we are 100% finished with flashing the IT mode based firmware and the BIOS and UEFI boot images onto the RAID controller. So now to finish up the process, we're just going to go ahead and kill the power. So, kill the power. Same thing here. Press the power button a few times to make sure everything's drained. Plug it back in and you are done with the process. That was it. So we're good. And that's how you flash IT mode based firmware on an R720XD or any of this generation of PowerEdge servers that contains like an H310 or an H710 or an H710P mini RAID controller. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. If it helped y'all out, like and subscribe.